Hi everyone, welcome again, welcome back. Welcome to PQ Talks. We continue our conversations of Ecoscenography today with our wonderful leaders and guests. One of the things that we really wanted to discuss at PQ Talks is the artistic pathways into the future. I mean, the times are difficult and have been really difficult now, but how can we move forward? So I'm especially excited about discussing the next topic, which is scenographic futures. So with that, I'm passing the mic again to Marianne and Tanya. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome back for those who were here with us all day. Welcome for the newcomers. I am Marianne Lavoie, co-host of the day. I represent the organization Ecosceno, which is a non-profit based in Montreal, and our mission is to support the cultural sector within socio-ecological transition by ecocenography consulting and reuse of materials. And I'm here today with...
Hi, I'm Tanya Bear, and I'm an eco-sonographer and the author of Ecoscenography, an introduction to ecological design for performance. Thank you, everybody. This is our last panel for the day. Thank you for those that have stayed with us for the whole day. I hope that we're getting a good cross-section of the field, and those that have just joined us for the first time, welcome. So we're going to start with a little provocation as well, but I might introduce the panel first. So we have three wonderful eco-scenographers on the panel. First, Celia Kieser is a Norwegian freelance scenographer, costume designer and theatre maker. Celia works with theatre, dance, music-based and cross-disciplinary projects in theatre institutions and the independent performing arts field. She explores eco-scenography as artistic method and received the Norwegian Theatre Prize Gullivianen, I cannot say it, as Sustainability Hero of the Year 2022. There is a Sustainability Hero Award in Norway, which is amazing, so awesome. Ang Xiao Ting is a hyphenated in-person and digital theatre practitioner, performer, director, dramaturg, programmer. Her works navigate the complexities of an integrated ecological practice with a focus on Southeast Asian foodways. Recent works, commissions include Recess Time, which received an honourable mention at Create COP27, Extinction Feast and Pickle Party, which all sounds very yummy. And finally, we have Vesta Liani, how do I say your Laine? Is a lighting designer from Finland and founder of art and science collective Fern Orchestra. She lives in the archipelago. It's getting that time of that day of the day. And it's like 3 o'clock in the morning in Australia. And works with plants and microorganisms. In her work, she studies the relationship between light, environment, and human. She's interested in interdisciplinary and slow processes. So welcome our panel. Thank you for being here today. And with that, I think we'll start with our little provocation, and then we've got some questions for our panel, and then we'll open up for further discussion and questions from the audience.
Yes, so for this provocation, we actually had a lot of fun building it. So we built it together, Tanya, me, and my Ecosceno team. So what I did with Ecosceno is that I asked my team, so what's your vision for the future of what we do Ecoscenography? Which was a very fun exercise, and it made us realize a lot of things. So you'll see a lot of different ideas that were sparked by all our conversations.
So I want to start with a speech that I remember very vividly when I went to my first ever World Stage Design in 2013. And I had just started my PhD in ecocenography then. And I was actually on a panel with Wallace Heim, who is I think an ecological artist and philosopher. And she gave a talk about her I guess her perception of ecocenography or eco-aesthetics at the time. And in her speech, she said She argued that the time will soon come when theatres will need to justify excessive and unsustainable behaviour, when those who want massive spectacles, world tours and blazing lights will have to openly justify and account for these technologies and excessive and exceptional drains. And I thought, wow, that was a big statement 10 years ago. And I was like, she's so brave standing up and saying that, because I was not ready to say that. And I think we're at a very interesting time here, 10 years now on, where this is something that I think we are considering, whereas 10 years ago it was seen as, you know, a real revolutionary thought. There you go.
So we looked back and now looking into the future. So one of the first thing that came up when my team and I, we were discussing how do we see eco-scenography in the future, was that, well, we might not need eco-scenography at some point, right? If it becomes so normalized, it just becomes scenography. So actually, where do we see ourselves in the future? And the answer that came up was that maybe our goal at Ecosceno is that we don't need to exist by 2040. So maybe, you know, over a 20 period time, our goal is achieved and we don't even need to do the training and the ecoscenography consultancy because it's so integrated within the practice, and the term ecoscenography will just be just like scenography. So that is the dream. So the dream of Ecosceno is that we all go jobless in 17 years. I'm looking for a hire in 2040, so if anyone in the room has an idea. But yes, that's the idea, is that it becomes so normal and it doesn't become something that we have to fight for and put forward. It just becomes something that we do as a, you know, as a normal practice.
Yeah, all scenography will be eco-scenography. So, yes, you're going to talk about this one too.
Yes. Also, another thing that came up in our conversation is the fact that oftentimes in our experience is that there is a, within the parameters of a play, there is the aesthetic and the budget and the technical needs that are put on the, you know, the same level of importance when it comes to decision making, right? And oftentimes, the caring for nature, caring for the environment is like a nice to have. It's not that important, but it's good. Everyone wants to have it, but it's not determining the decision that we make within a show. So the vision that we have is that one day it's all on the same level. So when we take a decision, it includes just on this, you know, it's just as important to consider the technical aspects, the aesthetics, the budget, and the care for a living system. Oh boy, yeah, that one is controversial.
It's controversial. You can be controversial. That's the whole point.
Right. Right, it's the moment to be controversial. And we were toying with the idea of should we put it in or not, and then we decided, yeah, this conversation has started at least in Quebec, so we're saying, you know what, we might as well put it out there. So there is a rise of eco-scenographed play, but there's also a rise of the amount of productions that we do. So we create more, but we do it more sustainably, right? But we've had a conversation with a theater, a big theater in Montreal, who are very much forward in doing eco-scenography, very involved, and they told us a few months ago, well, we want to have all of our play with, you know, eco-scenography, consultancy, and next year we want to go from 6 plays a year to 12 different plays a year. So right. So we had to have the awkward conversation to say, well, doing so, there is a chance that you'll cancel out all the efforts put toward sustainability if you create more and more and more. So one of the provocations that we have today is, at some point, maybe we might just stop wanting to create more and have, you know, always being in this, I don't know, like a very croissant capitalistic way of creating more and more every year, and maybe do more content, yes, but taking more time for each content to implement eco-scenography and to have also more time for the workers behind the work.
Yeah. Wonderful. talking about regenerating ecosystems. Did you want to talk about that one?
I can start, but you can. Another aspiration that we have, something that you mentioned also this morning, is that hopefully one day our field, our discipline will go beyond the reduction of negative impact and will actually be generating positive long-term impact. So participating as an active agent with the regeneration of ecosystem, because that's what our planet needs. We do need to reduce negative environmental impact. We also need to increase positive long-term impact. So hopefully we'll be participating in that.
And as I mentioned, and I just want to bring it back for those of you maybe who weren't here earlier this morning, but this idea of aesthetics and how we view aesthetics moving forward is going to be incredibly important. So how do we take a more ecological and evolutionary lens to what we do? And that question of how can something possibly be perceived as beautiful if it taxes and degrades living systems is a question that I think that we want to pose as part of our provocation. What does it mean to design in that framework? And another thing that I just want to highlight around points of innovation, which is basically what this panel is about. These eco-trailblazers sitting on the couch before you, they are innovators in the field in very different ways. And I think that I would like to see ecoscenography as this point of innovation. And Dylan Slagle wrote about this idea of what an ecological approach to theatre could bring. And he says, could an ecological approach to performance practice entail an advancement in the craft of theatre creation akin to electric lighting, microphones, or the shift to realism? So I feel like that shift that we're doing, that ecological shift, it's an aesthetic shift. It's a shift in our field from which innovation can spring, and that's a very exciting time for us. We can make that and decide what that looks like and how that is enacted. And so the question that we generally are posing today through our various questions to the panel is, what is the future of scenography in a climate-changed world? And that's basically what the day has been about. What does it mean to do scenography in a climate-changed reality? And we're going to start to look at that and what the next 10, 20 years might bring moving forward. So, exciting times. Yeah. Time to start chatting to the panel. All right, who's starting? It's you.
It's me. All right, so we'll have images of our guest work displayed in the background on loop. So take a close look because they've done some incredible things over the past years. So I would like to start with a general question to all of you, starting with Celia, but then we can go in this order. Can you just, for sake of context, can you tell us a bit about how you implement ecoscenography in your work?
Yeah. Yes. It's very nice to be here, and thank you so much for inviting me to this panel. I just have to say that it feels a little bit overwhelming to be introduced as an ecoscenographer, because it's a constant process. I feel like I'm trying to be an ecoscenographer, and hopefully, yeah. But it's a process. Yeah. And for me, it's all about making very conscious choices all the way through the design process, to question all the steps I'm taking, and try to take more time to reflect on what I choose to do. And for my case, because I'm working very much with materials, I also like to focus on the materials and let the materials lead the way through the process. And that has been really rewarding, and a way that's maybe easier to work with in the independent performance art field than in the more conventional theater context. But I'm trying to implement that way of working also in the conventional theater. And I try to challenge myself in how I can make big impact in big spaces, but with fewer materials or less volume of materials, to really look for those ideas that will make a big impact, but with less footprint. And sometimes it's easier, and sometimes it's really hard. But it's interesting to try to find these like ways of thinking. And also, I read something, I think maybe you said it, about thinking of the word scenography not as a thing, but as a verb, as doing scenography. And that's really helpful, I think, because it's something I do and it's a process, and try to think of it as a visual dramaturgy more than making things, building things, but what am I doing as a scenographer in the process with the rest of the creative team?
Thank you. Yeah, this morning we were discussing how ecoscenography is not an end goal, it is a process indeed. Xiaoting.
Hi everyone. So thank you so much for getting me to be part of this panel, even though I have to be very honest and say that when the topic was broached, I got a bit stressed because I felt I can barely understand the present and I have to talk about the future. But in any case, I'm really glad to be here and in the company of so many amazing artists. So I'm Xiao Ting. I'm an eco-theater artist from Singapore, and I make participatory theater and cross-genre performances that tend to happen outside traditional theater spaces. So you're looking at devised works, you're looking at multidisciplinary installations and digital theater. But my current focus is actually on Southeast Asian food waste, WAYS, and how this relates to ecoscenography, other than being super yummy, is that food is both context and material, and that each project that I do actually intentionally integrates the local community beyond the theater. So I work with researchers, gastronomists, farmers, business owners, scientists, and activist groups who become part of the creative team. So my goal is actually to strive for a synchronized vision between what the story is, ecological themes prioritizing the hyperlocal, and how the story is told. So for example, we begin each project by actually deciding on our priorities, and this isn't too challenging because I tend to work with scenographies who have similar priorities, and we often land on the choice of materials because that is the most tangible problem. And we start by asking ourselves 3 questions. Can we source from what's available? Can we redistribute the products of our processes? And can we build in parts so that the final product can be repurposed? But also with food, it just goes into their bodies, right? And actually, conversations about ecoscenography has inspired me to create new performance formats. So the next one I'm doing is called Cultured. It is actually a show disguised as a pickling workshop. This multi-species performance features an open source live streaming technology, live VJing, live actors, as well as mass community pickling as social scenography. Yeah. And this came about because I was asking myself questions like, what if gathering people and making pickles could be a backdrop for performance? What if the content generated for presumably one purpose can be repurposed to tell a totally different narrative? And what if non-humans, the microbes, were to take center stage? And so, this would not have been possible if I did not encounter ecoscenography.
Thank you, Xiaoting. Vespa?
Hi, thank you for inviting me. Yeah, wow. I'm just amazed about everything. But I work with Fern Orchestra, which is an art and science collective, and we do performances with plants and microorganisms. And we also do performances for plants that humans can also watch. Because there is this level in children animated stories for adults as well. So in kind of way, we think that when people are coming to theater with their own plants, there's a different kind of connection when they hold the plants in their lap and watch the performance where the plants perform. So this is something that we always have to think about also, that how are the plants? We have to give them light and water and so on. And also with the microorganisms, I try to somehow connect with the thought of this interspecies love, that we should really have love between species to understand what we should protect. Because we protect things that we love, and we love things that we know, and we know things that we have been taught. So we do need more knowledge about, for example, how do you love a microorganism that is so small that you can't see it with your bare eye, but they still produce the algae and bacteria in the world seas. They produce half of the oxygen in the world. And those are the small things in the sea that we can't see, and the seas are really polluted. If somebody cuts down the forest, we can really see that this event has happened. But when the seas are polluted, we don't really see it because we are not under the sea. But yeah, this is maybe my main goal, to have this love between species and also this empathy. And as a scenographer, I am a lighting designer, so I think mostly of also that not to use so less material that is possible. So sustainability is something that we think about. It's the first thing when we do a production.
Thank you, Vespa. So inspiring to hear about your work. Now we'll do a few questions for Celia to get to know your work a little bit more. So you've mentioned it before, but if you can go into further details, tell us more about your ecoscenography work within more traditional theater context in Norway. And we would like to know if it has changed over the years. So have you seen the shift towards sustainability in recent years within your Norway context?
Yeah, that's a big question. So my journey into ecoscenography started some years ago. I had been working as a freelancer for some years. I graduated in 2008. And I started to work in the independent field with environmental themes in some performances. A performance called Sustain that you might have seen some pictures from, where I made costumes and instruments and sets out of plastic waste. And working with this production that premiered in 2017, it was really hard to go back to working like I normally did, because I was working both in the independent field and in the institutional theaters. And as I did my other productions after Sustain, I started to question more and more how I was working, and I tried to think more sustainable in the way I was working also in the conventional theater productions. But this has been a long process, and in the beginning I was sort of a little bit afraid of telling that I was trying to work sustainable, because I had this feeling that people were thinking like, oh, you all know those like environmentalists, and you're just like making, in Norway we have this TV show for children many years ago that's called Blekkulf. It's like about an octopus and how to like save the ocean. So people were like, are you doing theater like for children? Or yeah, it's hard to explain, but I've had this feeling that it was hard to be taken seriously as an artist if you said that you were doing sustainability as an artistic method. But now it feels much easier to talk about this. It might be because I have evolved as an artist over these years, but I also think it's because the way the whole community and everyone are talking about the climate crisis has changed. So the theaters are more focused on trying to change their production methods, but I don't know if they know exactly how to do it. Yeah, and I think that a lot of countries have probably come much longer in this process than the theaters in Norway necessarily. But so now when I start a production, I try to say in the first meeting that I want to do this as sustainable as possible. And this opens up for a dialogue between me and the technical team in the theater. There was a question earlier on today from someone studying theater to be a theater technician, and he said, how can I as a technical staff sort of talk with the designers about this? And I think it's really important that, because when I come as a freelancer, I'm kind of like an underdog also into a big theater that has their way of producing things. So I need to make demands from the theater, but they also need to be able to make demands for me as a designer. So I try to leave the process as open as possible. I have my costume drawings, but I tell the costume department that this is my vision for the performance, but I try to make them understand what my vision is, so they can come with suggestions based on what they have in their storage. So I would rather alter my designs than for them to try to just exactly replicate what I have been drawing. This is the same with the workshops, that I want them to come with suggestions so we can find a better solution than I have been able to think of myself, and hopefully based on what they have and what they can reuse from other productions. Yeah, is that an answer?
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And we'll deep dive into it a little bit. So I think that's really helpful for particularly people who are working in, as I mentioned, more traditional theatre contexts, where you don't have as much freedom, where you are a freelance designer. How can you start to instigate those changes and start to change the system from within? So I think that your work is a really great example of co-creation. In the earlier session today, when I introduced the concept of ecoscenography, we talked about the 3 Cs: co-creation, celebration, and circulation. And co-creation, just as a recap, implies ways of using local, serendipitous, and place-based solutions in the making of the work. Working with place, what we have here, now, as a starting point. Can you tell us how you co-create with materials, and can you specifically talk about the costume design work that you did with natural materials? Because I think that's one we love. With the cone dress, we love it so much.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I just want to shortly comment on about the artistic freedom when working in the conventional theaters, because I personally also find that I have a lot of artistic freedom because the frames, like the budgets are higher. I have very skilled workers in the workshops that can sort of make my vision come true. As in the independent field, I have sometimes to do everything myself with much lower budgets. So in a way, you have a lot of freedom as well, and a lot of skilled craftsmen who have knowledge that it's so important to use. So I think that's a really important aspect of the bigger institutional theaters, that they have so much knowledge, and we can use that for changing the way we produce together with the theaters. Yeah. But as for the cone dress, yeah, I did this performance called Røyst, which translates into voice. I did this with a singer and composer. Her name is Bodil Rørtveit. I've been doing quite a lot of work with her over the recent years. And we wanted to make a performance that could tour by train, so everything was to fit into 2 suitcases. And the suitcases were also a part of the scenography on stage. So all the costumes, all the props had to be in the suitcases, and they had to be used in very many ways. And then we started to think about how to make a dress that would be an answer to the dress we made in Sustain, where I made a dress out of plastic garbage bags. So I designed this dress out of cones from the trees, and we went out in the forests. Our city, Bergen, is surrounded by mountains and forests, so it was really easy just to have like a lunch break and go out and source materials. And then I tried to figure out how to make a dress out of cones. So I ended up making it with cones and very, very thin steel wire or copper wire. And I had an assistant. She's called Julia Jensen, and she really was crucial to this because it took so many hours to tie all this together. And in the end, we had to put also an undergarment into this because the singer Bodil was supposed to put on the dress in front of the audience while singing. So to put on a dress made solely by cones in an elegant manner in short time, it's really hard because it gets stuck, you know, so we had to put something underneath. But the interesting thing was that when we worked with this, I realized that the cones make such a nice sound. And since she's a singer, she used her voice as her main instrument. Then we could also use the cones as a sound, like a landscape, for her singing. And then she could be inspired by the sound, and she would improvise a whole forest vocal like landscape out of the sound of the cones. So in the end, we had a suitcase full of cones, and we opened it up, and the audience just saw this pile of something that they don't think have that much value. And then it transformed into this like kind of like a dress for a queen almost, and transformed her whole figure. And the end picture of the performance was her lighting the cones with a flashlight, and it made this shadow that looked like trees. So we sort of went back into the forest, and that was our ending picture. Yeah.
Thank you. You might have seen some of the photos of the cone dress. It will come back later. Thank you for sharing that with us, Celia. Now we'd like to take it to Xiao Ting. So, Xiao Ting, can you please tell us about eco-scenography in your context?
So for me, I feel like it's impossible to talk about my practice in food waste without first understanding its relationship with the rest of Southeast Asia. Also because over 90% of our food in Singapore is actually imported. But I'm obviously not equipped to comment on the entire region, so what I'll do is I'll just try to share a couple of thoughts and reflections that I've had while doing my research. So first of all, ecoscenography is something that is already intrinsic in our arts practices because the arts have always been resource poor and less valued, probably due to its lack of direct link to economic growth. And because arts funding is also tied to economic productivity, I don't know, and this is a big question right now, whether or not artists will be incentivized to make ecoscenography a priority. But I actually think it is incredibly likely that ecoscenographic practices will also take off very quickly because as Asians, we gravitate towards tribes. We actively seek out community, and I think we're willing to work in a tribe and to achieve a collective good. And how this works to our advantage is that a key aspect of eco-practices is the time-consuming nature of the labor involved. So for instance, I think the photos came up on Extinction Feast. The set designer, Si Feng, her priority was to be very intentional about the life cycles of materials. And so we actually had many hands on deck because we received 30 boxes, hundreds of containers of candied pineapples that were expired, so those went into pickle party, but then she wanted to use the lids and the containers as part of the set design. I think we were washing a lot, and because it was sticky as well. And then the other thing with the labor with that project is that we both didn't want the show to look like an upcycled aesthetic. So there was a lot of detail put into the set design. And finally, the show was an immersive dining experience, and instead of disposables, because basically in Singapore, everything goes into the incinerator. We don't have a nationwide composting system for anything. The team chose to squat outside the building every day to wash hundreds of dishes, just to make that happen for the show. And just think about that labor involved. And therefore, as a director and as a programmer, if I choose to prioritize ecoscenography in the work, the challenge is therefore to safeguard compensation for labor. A lot of the countries in Southeast Asia, we do not have minimum wage. And hence, I have to ask myself, who's being exploited in exchange for ideology? Who's paying the price? So yes. But how food relates to ecoscenography in Singapore is that I think it adds a dimension of emotions. You're looking at care, intimacy, joy, sometimes stress. In work that can be heady, very mathy in carbon counting, and sometimes abstract. And I find that it's fascinating alchemy because the buy-in is just a lot quicker and audiences are much able to tolerate inconveniences. We love food. And the truth is, the other thing about it is that it's so intimate because whatever that we're creating is basically an offering for you to literally put something inside your body, and I have to find ways to respect that. So my job as an ecoscenographer often is go, ooh, limitations. Now, how can my knowledge of food beyond its main purpose of consumption help to solve problems? And even in the case of sound design. So with Extinction Feast, I work with a live Foley artist, and the goal was to make instruments out of food and repurposed homewares. So everything was live. She used live Foley, so bowls of water, even chopping of vegetables to create squelching death sounds. I mean, I am now able to tell you what makes weird sounds for very specific settings, and that was a really cool exploration. And therefore, all of this was actually integrated into the staging because I wanted it to be visible to the audiences.
Beautiful. Amazing. So just following on for a little bit more about your work, I think that what you do is really key to celebration. So just thinking again about the 3 C's, co-creation, celebration, circulation. Celebration is about using the stage as a platform to showcase ecological themes and sustainability and test out new ideas. Can you tell us how your work celebrates social ecological connections?
I think that I would love to talk about recess time, which is also in the book that Tanya wrote. So recess time is, we call it an ugly produce lunch party that stages a social event, lunch, as the site of performance and engagement. So it's theater outside a traditional theater space. And since 2017, or 16, we have served over 2,300 meals over 6 years, survived COVID, and in fact, we just served our 60-second session right before I came. And so it really is about combining the art of cooking, making conversations and storytelling into a single encounter. So how it works is that I actually work with home cooks, and I make it a point to work with home cooks and sometimes professional chefs, and we go on food rescue missions to salvage unwanted produce. They then have to incorporate this produce into a 3-course menu for 25 audiences. Each session has a host and a floating interviewer. In Singapore, we call it a kepo queen. A kepo just means like a busybody, but it's said in a very loving way. And these conversations are then recorded inside the Recess Journal, which was digitized last year, and it turned out to be about 436 pages because it's full of words from past chefs, photographs of our friends who come by, and food waste-friendly recipes. And I do think that a ritual like this is essential because it makes the audiences feel like they're part of a larger community. I feel like with Recess Time, how it celebrates the fact that socio-ecological conditions are a priority in making our kinds of works is because firstly, it's a very low barrier entry kind of program. We work with the theater practice to keep it incredibly affordable. I can't do the math right now, but it's like 3-course meal for 10 Singapore dollars, which is, I get yelled at a lot by the team because they feel like it's too cheap, or audiences come be like, how can you be so cheap? But what happens is that we put out a donation box. So if you're able to pay more, they give more. And if you're only able to pay $10, no one's gonna, that's fine as well. And if you want to pay less, that's okay. And we've done this for 6 years, and by some miracle, financially, we've been able to keep going. So that's something that I'm very thankful for. The second thing is that it's actually situated in living practice. So when I talk about food rescue, these are often local activist groups, and the idea is to work closely and meaningfully with them so that the relationship is reciprocal and not extractive. In fact, this year, the volunteer group that I work for, they actually gave the grocery store a little trophy to thank them for being part of this mission, and they were very happy about it. They kept, every time I was there, they just show me the trophy. And finally, in terms of the show itself, I mean, it's very much like improv because I don't know who's going to come in, and the script evolves depending also on the chefs. But what I think that I try to be considerate of is actually the wide spectrum of audiences that come by and how differently they connect with the work. So many different points of entry. And so what I do is we start each session with a 15-minute download of the context of food waste and a quick Q&A with the week's chef in terms of the story behind the plate. So everyone sort of walks away with a deeper understanding of the larger context, but not so much an info dump, and you also get the human stories behind it. And that's why I feel like the floating interviewer is such a key part of the work, because between the host, which is myself, and the interviewer, if you have questions about recipes, we can answer, no, we can't. The chef can answer it. We can point you towards the chef. If you have questions about the context of food waste, we can answer that. If you have questions about how to integrate that into your daily life and practices, we can also answer that. It's an incredibly one-to-one customized experience. So for me, as an artist who kind of stumbled into socially engaged work with recess time, I've come to realize that repetition, and hence sometimes boredom, is actually a necessary muscle. When we started, it was impossible, it was really challenging to get people to imagine why this was theater. And 6, 7 years later, we now have regulars. I love that. And like it was mentioned in my bio earlier, we actually got we received an honorary mention from Create COP27 last year, which is a global open call for art in response to the climate emergency. And I was so moved because I felt like that award went to the entire community. It wasn't just Practice Tuck Shop or our work, it was all of us involved.
Okay, so Vespa. Thanks so much, Xiao. I'm hoping that you will see there's so much variety. Actually, if we're talking about ecocenographic futures, we're talking about a variety of different pathways and different aesthetics, and that's what we're trying to showcase today with the 3 artists on stage. So Vespa, going through the 3 C's again: co-creation, celebration, and circulation. Circulation is about taking the afterlife of theatre materials and ideas into consideration. You have been working on a long-term project to create sets and props with paper mill residues that are recyclable in Finland and now called Pulp Action. How do you go about the process to innovate with this circular material?
Yes, Pulp Action was a workshop last year in World Stage Design in Calgary. And pulp has been used in Finland in theaters for something like 20 years now. But they have been used only in theaters that are in an area where there is a pulp mill. And it's really difficult because the material is really good. You can use it instead of glass fiber. It gets so hard that the opera square can stand on a rock if it's made from pulp. We call it pulp paper, although it's not paper. And we have a market name for it, Tapio paper. Tapio is an old Finnish forest god. And they have been using it in theaters for 20 years already. This is not something that I have innovated, but we have, with my friend, with my colleague Mika Haaranen, we have started a business called Tapio Paper. And we are dealers, we are pulp dealers. Because the pulp factory wants to sell like a whole ship, like 100,000 kilos of pulp. And none of us can have a space for that kind of pulp material and might not even need during your lifetime 100,000 kilos. So it took us 1 year to convince the pulp factory that they will sell us 1,000 kilo of it one at a time. And then we are also realistic that there are like 20 bigger theaters in Finland. So when we sell to those 20 theaters the 1,000 kilos, they won't be needing it for a while because it's quite a big pile of this paper sheets. So this is not something that we do for a living, for a business, but it's a form of activism. Like there are different kind of activism. Somebody glues themselves into artworks. Somebody sits, and these are all really good forms, I think. But this is our way of being an activist to get this sustainable material to theater work. And it can be recycled afterwards, and of course glass fiber can be done anything. If you do a hobbit hole from glass fiber, you will have a hobbit hole for the rest of your life. And that's probably not a good thing. So, because, yeah, I don't know, maybe it attracts hobbits, I don't know. I would like to see. But yeah, this is something that I actually haven't done one piece of set with this pulp paper, but I have deal it. And I have had this workshop where to tell people that how to make it, because I think that you are the artist and you have the innovation where to use it. But it's better for also the person who works with the pulp, because the glass fiber is really not very good to work with either. So this is the state of activism with the pulp factory and me.
Thank you, Vespa. You've mentioned the activism and the role of the artist, so we're curious. Could you define your role as a scenographer in the time of climate change?
Well, I already mentioned this interspecies love, and I've been thinking about, because the word love is not often used in Finnish language. We never use it. In Finnish, it's rakkaus. And I noticed that when I visited North America last year, people tend to use this word love really often. And I was like, okay, fine. But yeah, this is something that, because usually performances that are about climate crisis or nature loss, they are really dark and dystopic. And you start to feel like a shame of yourself because you are part of the problem and you know it. So you are ashamed and you feel guilt. And those are like passive feelings. They don't get you to be active because it passivates you. You are ashamed of something and you just want to like close the curtains and be silent and weep a bit. But we do need hope and we need acts of care. So that's why I think that we should also try to think about performances so that they can give you hope and they give you empowerment to move forward to a better sustainable world as well. And that's why I think that the scenography is the best way, because it's really equal for us. Because as I mentioned this word rakkaus the second time today, I say this love word, all the words can't be translated into another language. For example, we have 50 words for snow, different kind of snow in Finland. It's really hard to describe this different, well, it would take time. But that's why I think that, because we think about our mother language, but the scenography or the views or the lights or the sounds, they are really equal. And they are like emotions that we get. So somehow I try to remember that what kind of emotions we want that the audience will feel. And it's not something maybe that is done in a language, but somehow with the scenographic views, I think. And also there is this because if we think about the climate crisis, and we have nothing to be ashamed of, because it's like 100 these big companies in the world that has caused it. And they are the ones who want that people turn against each other. And they want that because if you are at war, it's really easy to be not to think about the environment. I really understand that people in Ukraine do not think about their environment at the moment because they have other issues. So that's why we as a Nordic countries or countries with great wealth, we have to think about it and share the knowledge to each other.
All right, so we're amazing. Thank you so much. I think we're just going to try to end on a bit of a question about the future and get your perspectives on this. So the question to the panel is, how do you envision the future, or how do you envision ecocenography of the future? What is the ecocenography of the future? What does it look like? From your perspective as well, you're all very different artists as well. But what's ecocenography going to look like in 10 years' time, in 20 years' time, in 30 years' time, whichever time frame you want to take? Mariam will be out of a job in 2040, so she might be keen to work with you. Okay, Celia, do you want to start?
Well, I think it was a very good thought you had, that ecocenography will not exist because it will just be scenography. I hope that the future will make it easier to take the right choices, because right now it's often a very hard process to make the right choices. For example, for traveling here from Norway, I decided to travel by train and bus, and to plan that trip was so much work, and it was so much more expensive for me to do that than to just book a plane ticket. But in the end, I decided to do it, I did it, and the journey was amazing, and I loved it, and it was too quick, actually. It took 2 days, 3 days, but it was amazing. But the point is, it's so easy to do the wrong choices. The easiest thing is to book that plane ticket, and it's probably much cheaper. The easiest way to make things is to do it the way we've always done it. So I hope that in the future, all the designers, scenographers, costume designers that are not very focused on sustainability will also have access to easy ways of doing the right thing. That they will have access to information and databases about materials, about construction methods. If there is consultants, that's a good thing, or if the theaters have all this knowledge, so they could get this information, because right now you need to do so much work. You need to be a detective, you need to do your research, you need to try to find the materials. There's so much work involved if you want to do the right thing. So I hope that in the future you could go to a warehouse like you have in Canada, pick up used materials, used pieces of sets, get information very easily, that there will be like an accessible database throughout. I don't know how to collect all the information, because so many people here have so much information, but it's all like scattered around, and you really have to search for it now. That's what I hope for the future.
Xiao?
Sorry, I was just taking notes. So in response to this question, I think for me, a big thing that's been on my mind is this thing about cultural sustainability, because I feel like we can't talk about the future unless we know what's been passed down from what came before us. So specific to where I'm from, I think that we transitioned from the agrarian to the hyper-urban so quickly that we've lost so much along the way. So part of the work is that right now. And I think that cultural sustainability also takes the form of language. And in Southeast Asia, there's generally a sentiment that we're losing our dialects, we're losing our mother tongues. And so, because language shapes minds. And if we lose our language, especially like, for example, in Mandarin, there's so much nuance about how it is less human-centric, it's actually very nature-centric. And it offers alternative ways of thinking that are also less Western-centric. And that's why Chinese language theater for young audience projects are actually a big part of my eco-practice. And I hope more people can see that link, and they are already driven to do that. Specific to food and as material and context, I look forward to more artists telling stories that celebrate Southeast Asia, because it is a land of abundance, and I think right now we just need to believe in that. I look forward to new materials and innovation in this field. So for instance, Ferry, I think you saw the photo earlier, she's an artist in residence at Practice Tuck Shop, and she's been experimenting with locally grown plant fibers to make cordage, for instance. And also, due to a lot of land scarcity and limited landfill, I think that everyone in this room, in your context, we're all very driven to find solutions. And with solutions, I think that we'll find a lot of creativity. Specific to our part of the world, I think a lot about plastic waste, because I think a lot of the recycled plastic actually ends up where I'm at. And I think there's a lot of technology right now to turn that into giant plastic sheets, to turn that into something that is usable. But I think the challenge also then is how do we mass produce this at a cost that theater can actually afford? I actually relate a lot to Tanya was sharing that one day eco will no longer be a thing. It will just be fully integrated because we need to out of survival. And secondly, eco is already and has always been the common sense approach. So as artists, I hope that we continue to be bold in our theater making, to keep championing radical authenticity and hospitality, because that's how we can keep building bridges towards a more hopeful future.
Vespa.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that we do need a new mindset. We do need to consider what is theater, and we also have to teach the audience that what the musical should look like. Because if you think about musicals, and the first impression is that, yeah, everything is big, and it's get bigger and bigger and bigger, and all the lights and everything, that is totally possible to do without all those resources. We have been counting like how much do the lights take electricity in our work, and I would really love all of you to count the amount of electricity, what are you used in one. It's really easy to do. You see the light board from the console, what kind of lamps you have, and just count how many minutes they are on, and is it 100% or so. It's really easy to make it. And with that data, just take some steps forward that reduce 20%, reduce this and this. And it's all about designing it beforehand. It's like designers, we are professionals, we can do it. It's like, just do it. And, yeah, we just have to rethink this whole thing, and also teach the audience to rethink it as well, I think. And I think that the theaters are really ready for this as well. Like, they just don't know how. And we just have to, for example, I think that these should, as you have done in Norway, that you say when you do the agreement with the theater, you say that there's a carbon budget in this. Of course, carbon budget is really, because we don't have the measurements now, but in the same way you have a budget, how much money you can use, how big is the stage, what fits in the stage. So in the same time you have this carbon budget, that this is the amount of resources we're going to use. And that's it. It's easy. Yes, very easy. Just do it.
Thank you, yeah. All right. Thank you, all three of you, for sharing those insights. We have about 10 minutes for Q&A with you in the audience, and we have 2 microphones going around, so please raise your hand. I see a hand already just right there.
I also have a question as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Michael.
Before we start, so sorry, friends. So my question is, just with technology just ever so growing, and we are implementing digital technology within human ecosystems like VR performances and stuff like that. I was wondering if there is a chance for us to include and interweave digital technology into Ecoscenography, and what that possibly looks like, and how that might impact, like, quote unquote, the magic of theater, which is like the intimacy between the performers and the spectators. But also, I'm also very curious, especially, I forget your last name, Ang Zhaoting, how or what, and also includes the Vespa and Sylvie as well, how and what does your craft as ecoscenographers transforms if you were to potentially integrate digital technology into your own work as ecoscenographers? For example, like Ang, I'm a little nervous, sorry. It's just stuff like potentially expanding that into more virtual reality, or something that you can potentially do stuff like for example, I'm from Canada. I would love to participate in your work with food. So I was wondering if that might work, or what are the possibilities, or what is that realm of possibility look like for you folks as ecoscenographers?
So, sorry. By digital technologies, do you have something specific in mind? Is it purely VR and AR?
That's the main sort of like route that I was trying to think of, but I think more of like whatever digital technology means to you folks as ecoscenographers is probably the thing. Like, I'm just trying to curate it to you folks and what it might look like for you. Just because, again, like how digital technology is advancing probably at a rapid rate as well.
I think that using artificial intelligence, for example, when you make images with AI, because it doesn't draw humans correctly. They look really, they have these really, like, I would like to have a hand with that there's a limb as well. But still, because there's some kind of otherness in those pictures. And I think that otherness is also something that we experience when we interact with plants or animals, because we feel that we are something other. But actually, we are not others. We are the nature. We are part of it. And that's the connection that is somehow lost now as well. So working with artificial intelligence and with the pictures or these all sane discussions that you can make with it. So it's something other, and I'm not sure if it's, this is something that I'm also thinking about now, like, and working with AI as well. So I think that there's similarities in this otherness, but do I want to learn from it? Maybe not. Do I want to learn about algae or plants? Yes, I would. This is like just my...
I was also thinking about what we learned from COVID. After COVID, it has been so much easier to work with creative teams in other parts of the world or in your own country. So for me, it's much easier now to work with people far away from where I live without having to travel all the time. And also the theaters has a lot of the meetings that they would do physically, now we do them digitally. So that reduces a lot of need for travel, which I think is really positive. That's the one good thing from the pandemic for me, I think. But I'm also thinking about, it's easy to think that digital solutions doesn't have a carbon footprint. Sort of, if you use like projections in a performance, or if you use VR, or like all these different technologies also have a footprint. So I think it's very important now, because there's a lot of different solutions on how to calculate the footprint of production, and all those I think also take into the calculation the digital footprint. So because it feels like it doesn't have a physical impact because it's digital, but it does. It doesn't maybe answer your question, but that's what I'm like reflecting on.
I think it does answer your question. I was also like, a digital footprint is also a very big thing as well. I'm just very curious to see, or just wondering how like that might impact your own work as well. But yeah.
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 I see a hand right there.
Hello, I'm from Tokyo. I'm a scenographer, and I'm trying to raise the voice about sustainability in Japan, Japanese theater industries. At the moment, there was nothing really much happening in Japan, so I organized a theater green book seminar in Japanese to the Japanese people working in the theater, and I found that people are very interested who are worked on scenography workshops, or the technicians. People actually worked with the materials. And I invited directors, but they didn't really turn up. And I found that it's something about physical touch and experience connected with the thinking about sustainabilities. And I wonder if you can give me some advice to convince directors, or how can we involve the directing point of view into eco-scenography? Is there any a concrete example of it you tried?
I can try to answer very shortly from my perspective. I've started to notice sometimes now that directors ask me to work with them because they know that I work with these sustainable methods. And I think that they find it intriguing and they want to explore it more. So, but that's quite a new notion for me as well, to get this kind of direct questions about it. But what I think is a positive thing is that you get a very open dialogue between the designer and the director on how to think about the performance. If you're doing a play with a script, how to work with the dramaturgy and how to work with the space, you could be able to have a very open and fruitful discussion, I think. So in my view, it would be really interesting for directors to work with designers who have specific points of views and are taking the sustainability into the discussion. But of course, other directors might see it differently. But that's my feeling of it.
A quick one from me, I think, would be that to ask them back the question, because I think that in cultural context, there must be something that is preventing them from wanting to step in. What are their fears, and can we better understand what are their assumptions in walking into a space like this? And perhaps armed with that information, then you can probably find the advice that you already have, I think.
I would say a free tip for everyone here, that directors usually understand marketing. So you should also market your work and your performances that this is the sustainable play now. Come to see it. What does it mean? Because it is new. And people, and you call the press and say, this is something new now, what we are doing. Although the play is the same Hamlet, but you have done it with a sustainable way. So that is something that directors understand, I think.
We'll have one last quick question, so our microphones are walking across the room.
Hello. As Vespa says, we are the nature, actually. We are part of the nature, and we are the compostable materials as well. And as an artist, in this chaotic planet organism, have the ecological works goes on, and have the artists, how do you position, how do you make a position on the way, because everything changes in every second. And what do you think about the future of buildings, the architecture, and its history and memory history like that, with as an ecological thinker?
Well, of course, if the building has been built, it should be taken care of. And of course, we have to think about the stages as well, that what is the concept of the future stage? Should we build them? Of course, if you live in a country with 50 words of snow, you can't be outside all the time. So you need the buildings. And I think that to treasure them, because it's, for example, I have an old car, so we decided to change the cars that it doesn't use petrol anymore, or benzene, what is called in English, gasoline, that it uses alcohol nowadays. So you get this old booze smell when you drive with it. So, but it works, and it's non-toxic with this ethanol. It maybe, yes, I should say. So there are ways to have and hold those old buildings, and in that way it's more sustainable, of course, and not to build new ones, I think.
Great. Okay, we'll end on that note. Okay, well, we actually have to finish up now. We have 4 minutes to kind of wrap up. Thanks everybody for joining us today for this panel. If you've been here the whole day, thank you so much for the long haul, and hopefully we've managed to give you a glimpse of ecocenography from different perspectives. Just a round of applause for our panel again. I think you should. It's really inspiring to share the stage with such amazing eco trailblazers today. And these are people who are leaders in the field, who are really changing the way we make and think about theatre. We had a little guest book that we circulated today, the Ecoscenography Day guest book, and a few people have written in it, so thank you very much. We have a comment that we want to read out from somebody, which I thought was a really nice conclusion. This comes from a director, performer, and advisor from the United States. Thank you, and they write, "Thank you for the reminder that this starts with identifying values and moving forward from there. And there is no one right way to incorporate ecoscenography, but we can discover the right fit for each project organically." And I think that's a fantastic conclusion to the day. So thank you to the person who wrote that.
We'll have the book right outside the room because we'll be kicked out soon. But if you want to add some comments, where you're from, what you do, Tanya will keep that as a little memory book. So that'd be really appreciated if you wanted to add to it. And also quickly, this week, if you want to pursue the conversation, I know my colleague Julie, Ian, and Tanya, you'll be there a bit. We'll be there on June 14 from 9 to 12 for, let's see, I have the notes here, an informal gathering on the exhibition that happened 4 years ago, the Quebec exhibition, where waste within the industry was discussed. So you can come and meet us there, because today, well, as you could see, it sparked a lot of conversation. So if you want to exchange more, it's a few hours to exchange with some of us that were here today. So you're welcome to do that. And maybe just for the last minute, we can hear where can we see you this week, ladies? Quickly. Yeah, any activities that you'll be working on that we can hear?
Yes. There is in the Finnish section, there is a bee company. So tomorrow Finland has the Finland Day from 3 to 5 p.m. And you can taste different kinds of honeys there. And we also have this drink called sima. I don't know what's it in English, but made out of honey. So welcome everyone there to see the artists who work with bees.
What time is that?
From 3 to 5 p.m. Is it p.m.?
Great.
Yeah.
All right. So,
And I just want to thank PQ and Barbara for inviting the Ecoscenography Day to happen. Thank you so much for having us and letting us take over your space for a whole day.
I'm actually standing here because I want to thank our wonderful speakers, our wonderful audiences, but also and mainly to Tanya Baer and Marianne Lavoie, who have been our guides the whole day. And it's a massive undertaking, and they have been brilliant. So thank you so